Speaking of cool shit, here's a pretty cool guy. He wrote this thing here called How They Are Preparing for the Elections. I don't know if y'all heard of this guy before. His name's K. Solon. He's a lesser known philosopher from Georgia who worked in the Bolshevik Party. K. Solon. So here we go. How They Are Preparing for the Elections by K. Solon. The elections to the 4th Duma. And we got a footnote here already. Okay, so the elections to the 4th State Duma took place in the autumn of 1912. But the Bolsheviks, headed by V.I. Lenin and J.V. Stalin, not to be confused with K. Solon, began to prepare for the... It just never will stop being funny to me. Began to prepare for the election campaign as early as spring of that year. Like, Stalin putting that down. Stalin writing that name down, like, with his furling his mustache like this and going... they're hot on the trail of Koba, but they'll never suspect K. Solon. I just like this cracks me up to think about. They may suspect Koba Stalin, but let's see if they suspect Koba Solon. That'll throw him off my tail. Alright, let me continue. The Bolshevik Party came out independently in the elections with the slogans of the Democratic Republic, an 8-hour day, and a confiscation of the land of the landlords. On March 1912, V.I. Lenin wrote the election platform of the RSDLP, which was published in leaflet form and distributed in a number of the biggest towns of Russia. The Bolshevik election campaign was conducted under the direct guidance of J.V. Stalin. His arrest on April 22, 1912, temporarily interrupted this work, as happened many times. He returned to St. Petersburg after escaping from his place of exile in Narum in September 1912. When the election campaign was at its height. Not Stalin breaking out of jail. So the elections to the 4th Duma that I just explained to you about are approaching. And the enemies of the movement for emancipation are mobilizing their forces. Before us are, first of all, the counter-revolutionary parties, the extreme rights, the nationalists, the Octoberists, all in one way or another support the government. What can they count on in the forthcoming election campaign? Not on the sympathy of the broad strata of the population, of course. The parties which have bound their fate with the fate of the Lena massacre government cannot count on the sympathy of the masses. Their only hope is the government's orders. And, as usual, of orders there will be no lack. The Ministry of the Interior has already issued a circular to the provincial governors recommending the adoption of measures to ensure the election of delegates from the Volus who are fully reliable and do not belong to the lefts. What all these measures amount to, we know from practical experience. The erasure of left candidates from the lists, the framing up of charges against them, their arrest and deportation. Such are the measures. On the other hand, the Holy Synod is advising bishops to take a most active part in the forthcoming elections, to secure the election to the State Duma of staunch champions of the interests of the church, and with the object in view to convene the election congress of the clergy in their respective sees, to proceed to publish special election newspapers, etc. The affairs of the governmental parties must be in a very bad way, indeed, if even the fathers of the church are obliged to neglect church affair for the sake of mundane affairs. Elections under the pressure of the provincial governors, spiritual and temporal, these, consequently, are the measures upon which they can count. True, there is one other method they can resort to, namely, to put on the non-party label, hoodwink the electors that way, get into the Duma somehow, and then throw off the mask. That is precisely the idea of the Kovno nationalists, who came out under the non-party mask the other day. But that method is subtle one, and that method is a subtle one and will scarcely suit our clumsy diehards. It is different with the Russian liberals, the cadets, the peaceful renovators, and the progressives. That crowd is more agile, and perhaps will be able to make the utmost use of the non-party label. And the cadets, whose coloring has faded, need this non-party label, need it in the extreme. The point is that during the period in which the Third Duma was functioning, the man in the street learned to look with a critical eye upon the Octobrists and cadets. On the other hand, the first Kura people, the big urban bourgeoisie, are disappointed with the Octobrists, who failed to justify their hopes. Consequently, an opportunity occurs to knock out of the saddle the Octobrists, the cadets, competitors in ministerial anti-rooms. But how can a bridge to the first Curia be elected if not through the progressive peaceful renovators? Therefore, long live the alliance with the peaceful renovators. True, it is necessary to go just a little bit to the right for this. But that does not matter. Why not go to the right if it is so Why not go to the right if it is so profitable? Sound familiar? And so, dress by the right. On the other hand, the small and medium urban people of the second Curia, the intellectuals, shop assistants, and others, have swung considerably to the left, especially in connection with the developing Lena events. The cadets are conscious of having committed grave political sins. They have tried too often to betray the cause of the popular freedom, and, God knows, they would even now gladly rush into the ministerial anterooms, if only they were sure that they would be admitted. But it is precisely for this reason that the urban democratic strata are beginning to look askance at the cadets. It is necessary to say also that to come before such voters without a mask, to expose their true features as liberal traitors, is somewhat dangerous. But what, under these circumstances, can be invented for the leftward swinging urban people who are already deserting the cadets, but have not yet come over to the Social Democrats? Of course, progressive fog. Pardon me, I mean progressive non-partyism. Oh, don't think that the progressives are cadets. No, they are not cadets at all. They will only vote for the cadet candidates. They are only the non-party servants of the cadets. And the cadets advertise the non-party progressives. What else can they do? They must swing to the left, at least in words, in the direction of non-partyism. And so, dress by the left. On the one hand, On the other hand, to the right, to the left. Such is the policy of the party of the liberal deception of the people, the Cadet Party. Hoodwinking the voters. Such are the means of the Russian liberals will count on. And this must be emphasized, non-party gallantry may play an important role in the elections. It may play an important role if the Social Democrats fail to tear the mask off the liberal gentry. If they fail to conduct a vigorous campaign in connection with the forthcoming elections. If they fail to exercise all the strength at their command to rally their urban democratic strata around the leader of the movement for emancipation, around the Russian proletariat. The St. Petersburg Zvezda, number 32, April 19th, 1912, reprinted from the newspaper, signed K. Solon. And so what K. Solon here is, of course, trying to get across is that you can't make a change of this or that bourgeois party, right? You can't act within that bourgeois party. You have to organize a party that opposes it. And this is my problem with a lot of the framing that I see from my comrades here in the West, on the left, is from many people. Like, one reason why I started talking about politics in the way that I do on stream is because so many comrades, I should say, on the left, I don't really know. I mean, Brezhnev, he's kind of not much he could do, right? But he's not that great. People like to over-celebrate him, I will say. Hi? What's going on? Did ya? Did you roll me one? Well, you're taking the spray away? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like, a problem that everybody say hi, Miss Leaping Lady. Say hi, Leaping Lady. Yeah, so, like, the problem with content creators, I think so many of our content creators on the left that I was seeing all over the place, and like one reason why I wanted to stream and talk about politics in general was because, like, this misunderstanding and this misreading of what is to be done and left anti-communism, in the sense that, like, so many people spend their whole time talking about Democratic candidates and what the Democrats could do if they wanted to get more votes and all this and that. And, like, every time I'm hearing someone say that, the only thing I can think of is to sit there and think to myself, I don't want the Democrats to win. Like, I don't care. I don't want the Republicans to win either, but it's not like an either or situation for me. Like, I don't want the Democrats to win, and I don't want the Republicans to win either. Right? Like, I don't want either of them to win. And that's the thing that gets me, is just like there is so many, I find, content creators on the left who do spend a lot of time talking about what the Democrats could be to, or what the Democrats could do to gain more votes and all of this other thing. And, like, what I would like to see is us to put up a party that is able to oppose the Democrats more readily. And we can't do that if we're spending like 364 days of the year, or sorry, 363 days of the year talking about how the Democrats could improve their strategy and move to the left, and all. Like, they're not gonna move to the left. What we need to do is get left supporters of the Democrats over to actual organizations, right? That's what we have to do. I talked about that before, and I regret it. Wait, you talked about what before, Virgo? Oh. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, though. Like, This is why we have to say it. You know what I mean? This is why we do need to say it, and we need to be critical of Bernie and the Mamdanis. And the way we be critical of them is by understanding that it doesn't matter what the individual Mamdani does, right? Or what his opinions are, or what he tweeted 5 years ago, or anything like that. What matters is what Mamdani is as a social democrat. And so what we should do is we hear, oh, this person's a social democrat? This is our position on social democrats. I back communists, right? If there's no communists in my area, then I'd rather build a communist movement rather than waste my time thinking about even who to vote for in my locality. You know? If there is a communist candidate to vote for, then I'll vote for I'll vote for them. You know? And that's my thing. And I don't say that to yuck anybody's yum or anything. And I'm not saying that to shame anybody who votes either, right? If you're in a swing state or you're in whatever city and you think that like that the best thing you can vote for is that, fine. I don't have a problem. That's never my problem, right? That's what I'm always saying. Is like that's never my thing. It takes 5 minutes to vote. It's like it's non-issue. It's a non-conversation. And that's my problem with it, is that it's a non-conversation that gets blown up into like a 363 day of the year conversation by so many content creators. And that's my thing. Yeah, I mean, whatever the election is, you know, whatever the election is. Whatever it is. If it's you do what is important to you, right? Or what you need to do in that election. But my thing is not that, and not who they vote for, and not going out to vote, and that takes, again, 5 seconds every so often when you do it. But what gets me is content creators who are trying to build our alternative media, who essentially are like giving the Democrats like essentially, although we know Democrats aren't really listening, and if they were, they would just use it to, again, create a more perfect dead-end funnel for this organization. So like, I don't want the Democrats to have that advice anyway, but all you're doing is like sort of giving advice to a party that just fundamentally wants to preserve imperialism, right? And that's it. I'm an electorally engaged leftist, but I'm tired of campaigning for election. Yeah, and I mean, that's, I think, what I keep trying to get across. Is it's not about, like, if you're aware of the constituency, you're aware of all the people in your electoral area, that's great. And you think that you know who you should vote for, I have, I no negative judgment, no negative feelings in any way. Just as the same as I have no negative feelings for somebody who looks at the system and goes, fuck that, I'm not gonna vote. Right? I feel the same way towards both of them, if you know what I mean. I support Palestine, M-Cop? I support Palestine liberation, of course, comrade. Land back. I've got the land back emote right here. How much money did the Democrats take from the working class in the last election? Exactly. I mean, and I mean, here's the thing, right? Think about the words of Kim Il-sung when he said that a party is set up with a particular ideology. And a party can never be changed because that ideology is its guiding ideology. So what is the Democrats set up to do? To preserve imperialism and capitalism. It can never change that. So what we need to do is strengthen the organizations of... So even if you do vote for this, this is just my advice. I'm not judging, again, just my advice is, if you're a content creator on the left, spend a little more time talking about organizations to get involved with, especially like independent parties that are looking to oppose the DNC rather than talking about DNC candidates and DNC perspectives, right? That's my thing. Especially if you're gonna sit on a train and like take photos of yourself reading what is to be done. You know? At least demonstrate that you've actually read what is to be done if you're gonna post pictures of yourself reading what is to be done. That's all. Just that. And that's all I got to say. You know, that's my rant there. Who wants another read from K Solon here? I think K Solon has another short read that we could squeeze in here before we go to the news. Who did that? I'm sure you can imagine who did that. One more K Solon? Alright. One more K Solon read here. I live in the Middle East and I feel a clear threat to our national security. Russia and her rulers are normalizing relations with terrorist Israel, which is planning to occupy more neighboring Arab countries. Yeah, I mean, my position is Palestine needs to be free. I mean, I probably would push back against the Russia part, but I understand the concerns with Russia and definitely with some of the relations they have, which ends up being exactly because of a large Russian-speaking fucking people there. But at the end of the day, also Russia facilitates like large amounts of important supplies and important data going to Iran and other resistance forces. So that's the only thing I would say, but I'm all for liberation. Ending the US empire is what we're all about, and Israel is just a little wing of the US empire. All right, this one is called Deductions. I think it's important step to ideologically distinguish our stance as separate from the Dems and not just Dems with extra steps. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you support Palestinian resistance? Yes. Yes. We support Palestinian resistance. All right. K. Solon. Not to be confused with J. Stalin. Deductions. The first wave of political upsurge is beginning to recede. The last strikes are in progress. Here and there, voices of protesting strikers are still heard. But these will be the last voices. For the time being, the country is beginning to assume its normal appearance. What lessons can the proletariat learn from recent events? Let us reconstruct the picture of the days of the movement. April 4th, the Lena shooting. About 500 killed and wounded. Apparent calm reigns in the country. The government's mood is firm. Protest strikes begin in the south. April 10th, an interpellation in the Duma. Strikes increase in number. The situation becomes alarming. April 11th, Minister Makarov's answer. So it was, so it will be. Timashov does not quite agree with Makarov. God, that name tripped me up. The first signs of confusion are observed in the ranks of the government representatives. Meetings and strikes in St. Petersburg. The movement grows in the provinces. April 15th, a demonstration of students and workers in St. Petersburg. April 18th, over 100,000 workers strike in St. Petersburg. Workers' demonstrations and organized. The government are losing their heads. Makarov is afraid to appear in the Duma. Timashov apologizes. The government retreats. A concession to public opinion. The deduction to be drawn is clear. Emancipation cannot be achieved by silence and patience. I'm going to highlight those two words. The more loudly the voices of the workers resound, the more the forces of reaction lose their heads, and the sooner they retreat. Now look, from this timeline chat, do you see any mention of important leftist cadets being elected? Huh? Do you see any mention of, like, leftist cadet candidates needing to be elected to the Duma here? Or are we dealing with the actions of the masses in putting pressure on the status quo, on the existing government, on the existing state? The deduction, again, to be drawn is clear. Emancipation cannot be achieved by silence and patience. The more loudly the voices of the workers resound, the more the forces of reaction lose their heads, and the sooner they retreat. The days of the movement are the best field for testing the political parties. Parties must be assessed not by what they say, but how they behave. In the days of the struggle, how did the parties, which call themselves popular parties, behave in those days? The extreme Black Hundred landlord group, headed by the Zemlovkis, the Markovs, had difficulty in concealing their joy over the Lena shooting. There, the government has displayed strength and sternness. Let the lazy workers know whom they have to deal with. They applauded Makarov. They voted against the Social Democratic group's interpellation with the Duma. Their newspaper, Zemshina, did all in its power to incite the government against the Lena agitators, against the workers on strike all over Russia, and against the workers' newspaper, Zvezda. And Zemshina is the Black Hundred newspaper, an organ of the deputies of the extreme right of the State Duma, published in St. Petersburg from 1909 to 1917. The modern Black Hundred landlord group, headed by the Balshovs and the Krupinskys, had no real objection to the shooting. It merely regretted that the government had acted in too transparent a manner. Your liberals here. Too openly. Therefore, while shedding crocodile tears over the killed, it at the same time expressed the wish that the government should be tactful in regard to shooting. It voted against the Social Democratic group's interpellation and its organ Novaya Vemya, urged the government not to stand on ceremony with convinced strikers, to subject demonstrators not to light fines or arrest, but to stern punishment, and as regards the agitators under arrest, not to release them from prison. And Novaya Zemlya was New Times, organ of the reactionary nobility of the bureaucratic circles, published in St. Petersburg from 1868 to October 1917. In 1905, it became one of the organs of the Black Hundred. The party of the conservative landlords and parasitical strata of the bourgeoisie, the Octoberist Party, headed by the Gotchkovs and Kolobovs, mourned not over the dead, but over the fact that the ministry, which is supported, had suffered unpleasantness, the strikes, as a consequence of the improper resort to firearms on the Lena. Describing Makarov's statement as being not altogether tactful, it, in its organ, Gorlos Moskvi, expressed the conviction that the government was, quote, not to blame for the bloodshed. It caused the defeat of the Social Democrats' interpolation. It incited the authorities against the instigators. And when Timashov tried to rehabilitate Makarov, it applauded him and considered the incident closed. And Golos Moskvy was the voice of the Moscow, a daily newspaper, organ of the Octoberist Party, published in Moscow from December 1906 to 1915. Edited and published by A.I. Gochkov. The party of the liberal landlords and the middle strata of the bourgeoisie, the Cadet Party, headed by the Milkovs and the Malakovs, hurled verbal thunderbolts against the Lena shooting, but expressed the view that it was not the principles of the regime, but individuals of the type of Trechkenso and Bulyovo who were to blame. You know, Orange Man bad. This is the Orange Man bad people here. Therefore, while chanting a hypocritical "we erred" in connection with Makarov's statement, it was quite satisfied with Timashov's repentant statement and quieted down. On the one hand, it supported the Social Democratic group, which demanded that the representatives of the government should come before the court of the country. On the other hand, it welcomed the representatives of the industrial bourgeoisie, Messrs., the peaceful renovators, who appealed the same representatives of the government to curb the striking workers by means of civilized measures. And to leave no doubt whatever about the Cadets' Party loyalty. It came out and declared it is in its rec that the Lena strike was a spontaneous riot. That is how all these popular parties behaved during the days of the movement. Let the workers remember it, and give them their deserts during the days of the election to the Fourth Duma. Social democracy alone defended the interests of the workers in the days of struggle. It alone told the whole truth. The deduction to be drawn is clear. Social democracy is the sole champion of the proletariat. And here social democracy is synonymous with Marxist. Yes. No, I'm not reading this from Marxist.org. I'll link it in a second. I'm reading this from Iskra Books, my comrades at Iskra, who I had the pleasure of working with. I don't know why that didn't link. The deduction to be drawn is clear. Social democracy is the sole champion of the proletariat. All the other parties mentioned are enemies of the working class. The only difference between them being the different ways in which they fight the workers. One fights by means of civilized measures, another by means of not quite civil measures, and a third by means of quite civilized measures. Now that the first wave of the upsurge is receding, the dark forces which had been hiding behind a screen of crocodile tears, are beginning to come out in the open again. Zemshchina is calling for measures against the workers' press. Novya Vimya urges that the convinced workers should be shown no mercy. And the authorities are setting to work, arresting more and more unreliables. What can they count on in their new campaign? How are we to explain the boldness now displayed by the authorities, who had almost lost their wits? They can count on only one thing: on the impossibility of rousing the mass protests on every occasion, on the unorganized state of the workers, on their insufficient class consciousness. The St. Petersburg Zvezda, number 33. April 22nd, 1912. Reprinted from the newspaper, signed K. Solon. I got one last real fast one here for you. This one's super quick. So you actually get one extra bonus, chat, called Our Aims. Anyone who reads Zvezda knows its contributors, who are also contributors to Pravda, will not find it difficult to understand the line I will pursue. And, of course, Pravda, which is truth, is a daily Bolshevik legal newspaper published in St. Petersburg. It was founded in the spring of 1912 on the initiative of the St. Petersburg workers. The first issue of the newspaper appeared on April 22, 1912. On March 15, 1917, J.V. Stalin was appointed a member of the editorial board of Pravda. On his return to Russia in April 1917, V.I. Lenin took over the direction of Pravda. Regular contributors to the paper were V.M. Molotov, Y.M. Sverdlov, M.S. Olimsky, K.N. Semyolova, and others. During that period, Pravda, in spite of the persecution and vilification to which it was subjected, performed tremendous work in rallying the workers, revolutionary soldiers, and peasants around the Bolshevik Party, exposed the imperialist bourgeoisie and its hangers-on, the Mensheviks, the socialist revolutionaries, and fought for the transition from the bourgeois democratic to the socialist revolution. Remember this, and this footnote is so important because sometimes you will hear left comms and orthodox Marxists make the charge that Lenin and Stalin never wanted to go beyond the bourgeois democratic revolution, and that they just wanted to set up the bourgeois republic. That was their minimum program. But as soon as they realized that it was possible and the masses were ready to move beyond that, that's when they called for the liquidation of the Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries, knowing that they would stand in the way. So they literally did the opposite in reality of what, Dem socks and what people accuse them of. They literally did the opposite thing, which is, the funny thing. Lenin and Stalin, they wanted the maximum program. They just realized that if the minimum is what was for sure possible, the maximum was the goal, And as soon as they realized that the masses were ready to move beyond that and the Mensheviks were standing in the way of that, that's why they were for the liquidation of the Mensheviks from the party. Rightfully so. And so the Mensheviks were purged from the party. They weren't killed, they were purged. And guess what? Purging reactionaries from the party makes your party better, actually. There, I said it. I said it. Purging just means you're not allowed in the party. Yeah, you're just disenrolled. That's what purging means. That's all it means. It's not a scary word. You're let go from the party. Anyway. Anyone who reads Zvezda and knows its contributors, who are also contributors to Pravda, will not find it difficult to understand the line I will pursue. To illuminate the path of the Russian labor movement with the light of international social democracy. To spread the truth among the workers about the friends and enemies of the working class. To guard the interests of the labor cause. Such are the aims of Pravda will pursue. In pursuing these aims, we do not in the least intend to gloss over the disagreements that exist among the social democratic workers. Much like Larry doesn't. And nor do I. Only I'm just better at it now. Because I learn things. Anyway. More than that, in our opinion, a powerful and virile movement is inconceivable without disagreements. Complete identity of views can exist only in the graveyard. But that does not mean that points of disagreement outweigh points of agreement. Far from it. Much as the advanced workers may disagree among themselves, they cannot forget that all of them, irrespective of group, are equally exploited. That all of them, irrespective of group, are equally without rights. Hence, Pravda will call, firstly and mainly, for unity in the proletarian class struggle. for unity at all costs. Just as we must be uncompromising towards our enemies, so must we yield to one another. War upon the enemies of the labor movement. Peace and cooperation within the movement. That is what Pravda will be guided by in its daily activities. It is particularly necessary to emphasize this now, when the Lena events and the forthcoming elections to the Fourth Duma raise before the workers with exceptional persistence the necessity of uniting in a single class organization. In entering upon our task, we are aware that our path is bestrewn with thorns. It is sufficient to recall Zvezda, which has experienced repeated confiscations and persecutions. But the thorns will not daunt us if the sympathy of the workers, which Pravda now enjoys, continues in the future. From this sympathy, it will draw energy for the struggle. We would like this sympathy to grow. Moreover, we would like the workers not to confine themselves to sympathy alone, but to take an active part in the conduct of our newspaper. Let not the workers say that they are not used to writing. Working class writers do not drop ready-made from the skies. They can be trained only gradually, in the course of literary activity. All that is needed is to start on the job boldly. You may stumble once or twice, but in the end, you will learn to write. And so, all together, let us set to work. Pravda number 1, April 22nd, 1912. Reprinted from the newspaper, unsigned. That's the very first article in Pravda. There you go, comrades. That's our Stalin read today. The first Pravda article we end on.